Order. Statement: the Secretary of State for exiting the European Union. Secretary David Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thought it would be useful for the House to be brought up to date on the working of my department after the referendum of the 23rd of June. Our instructions from the British people are clear. Britain is leaving the European Union. The mandate for that course is overwhelming. The referendum of June the 23rd delivered a bigger vote for Brexit than that won by any UK government in history. It's a national mandate, and this government is determined to deliver it in the national interest. And the Prime Minister has made clear there will be no attempt to stay in the EU by the back door, no attempt to delay, frustrate or thwart the will of the British people, no attempt to engineer a second referendum, because some people didn't like the first answer. The people have spoken in the referendum offered to them by this government and confirmed by Parliament, by all of us on both sides of the argument, and we must all respect it. That's a simple matter of democratic politics. Now, naturally, people will want to know what Brexit will mean. Simply it means leaving the European Union. So we will decide on our borders, our laws and the taxpayers' money. It means getting the best deal for Britain, one that's unique to Britain and not an off-the-shelf solution. This must mean controls on the numbers of people who come to Britain from Europe, but also a positive outcome for those who wish to trade in goods and services. This is a historic and positive moment for our nation. Brexit is not about making the best of a bad job. It's about seizing a huge and exciting opportunity that will flow from a new place for Britain in the world. There'll be new freedoms, new opportunities, new horizons for our country. Now, we can get the right trade policy for the UK. We can create a more dynamic economy, a beacon for free trade across the world. We want to make sure our regulatory environment helps rather than hinders businesses and workers. We can create an immigration system that allows us to control numbers and encourage the brightest and best to come to this country. But I want to be clear to our European friends and allies. We do not see Brexit as ending our relationship with Europe. It's about starting a new one. We want to maintain or even strengthen our cooperation on security and defence. It's in the interest of both the UK and the European Union that we have the freest possible trading relationship. We want a strong European Union succeeding economically and politically, working with Britain in many areas of common interest. So we should all approach the negotiations that come about our exit with a sense of mutual respect and cooperation. Now, I know the House will want to be updated about the work of the Department. It's a privilege to have been asked to lead it by the Prime Minister, and the challenge we face is exciting and considerable. It will require significant expertise and a consistent approach. Negotiating with the EU has to be got right, and we are going to take the time to get it right. And we'll strive to build a national consensus around our approach. Now, we start from a position of economic strength. As the Prime Minister said yesterday, there will be challenges ahead. But our economy is robust, thanks in no small part to the work of my right honourable friend, the member for Tatton. The latest data suggest our manufacturing and service industries and consumer confidence are all strong, contrary to some of the predictions earlier. Businesses are putting their faith and their money into this country. Over the summer, SoftBank, GlaxoSmithKline, Siemens all confirmed that they will make major investments in the UK. Countries including Australia have already made clear their desire to proceed quickly with a new trade deal for the UK. As other nations see advantages to them, I am confident they will want to prioritise deals with the UK too. But we are not complacent. Our task, Mr. Speaker, is to build on this success and strength and negotiate a deal for exiting the European Union that's in the interest of the entire nation. Now, as I have already indicated, securing a deal that's in our national interest does not and must not mean turning our back on Europe. To do so would not be in our interest, nor Europe's. So we'll work hard to help establish a future relationship between the EU and the UK that's dynamic, constructive and healthy. We want a steadfast and successful European Union after we depart. And so, as we proceed, we will be guided by some clear principles. First, as I said, we wish to build a national consensus around our position. Second, we'll always put the national interest first. We will always act in good faith towards our European partners. Third, wherever possible, we'll try to minimise any uncertainty that change can inevitably bring. And fourthly, we will crucially, by the end of this process, have left the European Union and put the sovereignty and supremacy of this Parliament beyond doubt. The first formal step of the process of leaving the European Union is to invoke Article 50, which will start 2 years of negotiations. Let me briefly update the House on how the machinery of government will support our efforts and the next steps we'll take. First, responsibilities. The Prime Minister will lead the UK's exit negotiations and will be supported on a day-to-day basis by my department. We'll work closely with all government departments to develop our objectives and to negotiate new relations with the EU and the rest of the world. Supporting me is a first-class ministerial team and some of the brightest and best in Whitehall who want to engage in this national endeavour. The department now has over 180 staff in London, plus the expertise of over 120 officials in Brussels. And we're still growing rapidly with the first-class support from other departments. As to the next steps, the department's task is clear. We are undertaking 2 broad areas of work. First, given we're determined to build that national consensus, we're going to listen and talk to as many organisations, companies and institutions as possible, from the large PLCs to small businesses, from the devolved administrations through to councils, local government associations and major metropolitan bodies. We're already fully engaged with the governments of Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland to ensure a UK-wide approach to our negotiations. The Prime Minister met the First Minister of Scotland and Wales and the First Minister and Deputy First Minister of Northern Ireland in July. And last week I visited Northern Ireland for meetings with its political leaders, where I reiterated our determination that there will be no return to the hard borders of the past. I'll visit Scotland and Wales soon. My ministerial colleagues and I have also discussed the next steps of the range of organisations. My first meeting was with the General Secretary of the Trade Union Congress, followed by key business groups, representatives of the universities and charitable sectors, and farming and fisheries organisations. But this is just the start. In the weeks ahead, we'll speak to as many other firms, organisations and bodies as possible, research institutes, regional, national groups and businesses up and down the country, to establish their priorities and the opportunities for the whole of the UK. As part of this exercise, I can announce we'll be holding roundtables with stakeholders in a series of sectors to ensure all views to be reflected in our analysis for the options of the UK.
Order, right honourable gentleman, just resume his seat for a minute. There's quite a lot of unseemly, dare I say it, somewhat unstatesmanlike noise from a sedentary position. Somebody muttering, too long. It's not too long at all, the right honourable gentleman is perfectly in order. And let me just remind the House that it's always been my practice to facilitate the fullest and most extensive interrogation of the relevant minister, and that will happen today. Everybody will have his or her opportunity. But it would be a good thing if people would listen respectfully. If they can manage a beaming countenance reminiscent of that of the Foreign Secretary, that will be a bonus, but it is not obligatory. Secretary of State.
Those stakeholders include broadcast, aviation, energy, financial services, automotive and others. I'll also engage with the Member States. I'm beginning this with a visit to Dublin this week. I'm working particularly closely with the Foreign Secretary and Secretary of State for International Trade. They've been meeting counterparts in Washington, Brussels, Delhi and the capitals of other EU states. Whilst we do this, my officials, supported by officials across government, are carrying out a programme of sectoral analysis and regulatory analysis which will identify the key factors for some 50 sectors of British business. And that's extremely important for the House to understand. We're building a detailed understanding of how the withdrawal from the EU will affect the domestic policies to seize the opportunities and ensure a smooth process of exit. Now, Mr. Speaker, the referendum result was a clear sign that the majority of the British people want to see Parliament's sovereignty strengthened. And so throughout this process, Parliament will be regularly informed, updated and engaged. Finally, we are determined to ensure that people have as much stability and certainty in the period leading up to our departure from the EU. Until we leave the European Union, we must respect the laws and obligations that membership requires of us. We also want to ensure certainty when it comes to public funding. The Chancellor has confirmed that structural and investment fund projects signed before the autumn statement and research and innovation projects financed by the European Commission granted before we leave the EU will be underwritten by the Treasury after we leave. Agriculture is a vital part of the economy, and the government will match the current level of annual payments that the sector receives through the direct payment scheme until 2020, again providing certainty. In terms of the position of EU nationals in the UK, the Prime Minister has been clear she is determined to protect the status of EU nationals already living here, and the only circumstances in which that would not be possible is if the British citizens' rights in European member states were not protected in return, something I frankly find very hard to imagine. I'm confident together we'll be able to deliver on what the country asked us to do through the referendum. I'm greatly encouraged by the national mood. Most of those who I've met who wanted to remain have accepted the result and now want to make a success of the course Britain has chosen. Indeed, organisations and individuals I've met already that back the Remain campaign now want to be engaged in the process of exit and are identifying positive changes that will flow from it as well as the challenges. I want us all to come together as one nation to get the best deal for Britain. Mr. Speaker, in conclusion, we are confident of negotiating a new position that will mean this country flourishing outside the European Union while keeping its members as friends, allies and trading partners. We will leave the European Union, but we will not...
Oh, hold on. The Honourable Member for Perth and North Perthshire is an aspiring statesman. His aspiration may be a little way from fulfilment, but I want to hear the Secretary of State's peroration. Secretary of State.
It's an aspiration of very long standing, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, in conclusion, we are confident of negotiating a position that will mean this country flourishing outside the EU, keeping its members as our friends, our allies and our trading partners. We will leave the European Union, but we will not turn our back on Europe. We will embrace the opportunities and freedoms that will open up for Britain. We will deliver on the national mandate for Brexit, and we will deliver it in the national interest.
Emily Thornberry.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And let me begin by welcoming the Secretary of State to his new role. It's been 8 years since his last appearance at the Dispatch Box. Back then, I believe his last words were, "You have to answer." So let's hope that he'll be giving us some answers today. And can I also welcome his attitude, as expressed today, that he will be talking to everybody and listening to everyone. Could I give him some advice? Perhaps he should start by putting a telephone number on his website. It's been a little bit difficult tracking his department down. So it would be nice if he could begin by being a little bit more out later. But some of the answers that we would expect, Mr. Speaker, because the spin before today's statement was so much promise. We heard that we were going to hear what the government's strategy for Brexit was. But what we've heard instead hasn't been a strategy, it hasn't been a thought-out plan, it's just been more empty platitudes from a government that just continues to make it up as it goes along. So last night we had the Prime Minister seemingly on a plane, it's seemingly, well, telling us at least what she wasn't going to be doing. So it seems that we're not going to have a points-based immigration system, and we're not going to have any extra money for the NHS, and we're not going to have any reduction in VAT on fuel. But what we haven't been told is what they are going to do. When are they going to tell us how they're going to deliver, for example, free trade for British businesses whilst also imposing immigration controls, let alone how they're going to address the red lines that Labour's demanded on protection of workers' rights and guarantees for EU citizens? The Secretary of State says that he wants to present a positive vision of Britain post-Brexit. But unless he can tell us what deal they're working towards, how they plan to achieve it, and whether other member states will accept it, his positive vision is just a pipe dream. It is just rhetoric. Can I remind the Secretary of State of what he said 2 months ago? He said this: the negotiating strategy has to be properly designed, and there has to be serious consultation before it's done. And this is one of the reasons for taking a little time before triggering Article 50. Well, absolutely, a little time before triggering Article 50. But where is it? Where is the negotiating strategy? What serious consultation has taken place with other member states? And in the absence of either, why are the government pushing ahead with Article 50? What has happened since July? What is the plan? Can I remind the House of what the Foreign Affairs Select Committee said in July about the previous government? The previous government's considered view not to instruct key departments to plan for the possibility of a leave vote amounted to gross negligence. And what do we have to say, therefore, about the current government when 2 months later we are no further forward? Surely all we can say is this: that when it comes to planning for Brexit, they have gone from gross negligence to rank incompetence. And when we see the warnings to Britain from Japan and others at the G20, when we see investment from companies like Nissan put under threat, it is British workers who are going to be paying the price for this government's incompetence. This morning, the Japanese ambassador, speaking on the Today programme, said something that was as honest as it was deadly. He said this: the problem that we see is not to have a very well thought through consideration before you start negotiation. Absolutely right, Mr. Speaker, absolutely right. Are the government rushing to start negotiation? Yes. Have they got a well thought out plan for that negotiation? No. So finally, Mr. Speaker, I must say this. The Secretary of State has won plaudits in the past for his principled stance around issues such as parliamentary sovereignty, and indeed he's talked about it again today, about the importance of parliamentary sovereignty. He's talked about democratic rights, he's talked about the rule of law, so surely he cannot think that it's right that Article 50 should be triggered by royal prerogative. And as the former Attorney General, his friend and mine, the Right Honourable Member for Beaconsfield, has said, the idea that a government could take a decision of such massive importance without parliamentary approval seems to me to be extremely far-fetched. Well, I don't think it's far-fetched. I think it's just plain wrong. And I think that if the Secretary of State was still on the backbenches, he would agree with me. Mr. Speaker, when there is no evidence of sound planning by this government, no detail whatsoever on the deal that they want to strike, no strategy for achieving that deal, or the reasons for pushing it through, Parliament must have more of a say on those issues. We must have more than simply a say. We must have a vote.
Secretary of State.
That was it. All right. I thank the Honourable Lady for her welcome. As is, I suspect, very common in the position of people entering Cabinet, I have had a very large number of congratulatory emails and telegrams. The best one, actually, was the shortest. It said, "Many congratulations, I now believe in the resurrection." But let me deal with the measures that she has raised. She accuses, the Labour Party accuses us of rank incompetence. The Labour Party. Yeah? The Prime Minister, when she was on her trip to China, described her approach to complex problems, and this is certainly a complex problem. She described it as collect the data and analyse it, make your judgment, make your decision, and implement it. The Labour Party clearly does it the other way round. Indeed, the Americans have a phrase for the way that they approach these things, not looking at the problem, not looking at the issue, not looking at the data. They call it load, fire, aim. Now, that might be very appropriate for the circular firing squad that's the Labour Party, but it's not appropriate to running the national interest. Now, she raised the issue of the points-based immigration system. What the Prime Minister said in China was very clear. What she wants is a results-based immigration system, one that actually delivers an outcome the British people voted for, and that's what she will be delivering at the end of this. She mentioned the Japanese ambassador. The Japanese ambassador this morning said, I have to do it from memory, but he said something to the effect that he had not met a company that did not think Britain was the best place in Europe to have its business, not one, and that he admired the Prime Minister's approach to this negotiation. So I think she should pick her quotes a little more carefully. But let me come to the central point, if there was a point, in what she had to say.
There wasn't.
Article 50. Before we entered onto this course, there was a bill that went through this House, the referendum bill. It was voted for 6-1 in this House. She voted for it. She voted for it. Now, what did it say? It was presented by the Foreign Secretary at the time, and he said, we are giving the British people the decision to make on this. Not advice, not consultation, the decision. And what she is trying to wrap up in a pseudo-democratic masquerade is the most anti-democratic proposal I have heard for some time. She wants to deny the will of the British people, and up with that we will not put.
Mr. Ian Duncan Smith.
Mr. Speaker, can I first of all start by welcoming my right honourable friend's return to the front bench. As someone who's recently left it voluntarily, I have to tell him, I unreservedly welcome him, and I also welcome his incredibly optimistic tone to the whole idea of the United Kingdom leaving the European Union, forging a new relationship with the rest of the world. And on the specifics of the statement, can I just ask him to... Well, actually, the one specific, which is we are leaving the European Union. So on that specific, Mr. Speaker, I wonder if I might press my right honourable friend. In the media today, we've had a certain amount of speculation about what the details are of actually what that means in terms of controlling our borders. Can I ask him, when he gets to the dispatch box, to confirm to us that in leaving the European Union, the number one thing that is absolutely not negotiable is that this United Kingdom will take control of its borders and the laws that are relevant to that, and that is not negotiable for any other deal.
Secretary of State.
I thank the right honourable gentleman for his question. I'll say two things. The first thing is that in the referendum that we've just had, the biggest mandate ever given to a British government, a clear, large part of it was the question of immigration. And the Prime Minister has made it very plain that the current status of immigration cannot go on, and we will bring it to an end as a part of this process.